welcome back, everybody. If you're anything like me, Gore Miser, everyone else here at Hi-Rez Studios, it has been a long 3.5 months. A lot has changed. Teams have changed. Players have changed. Names have changed. Hell, the game itself has changed. But the SMITE Pro League is back, and it is better than ever. So it is my absolute pleasure and excitement to welcome everybody for the first time back. Happy Friday, everyone. You are watching the SPL Season 8, Week 1, Day Number 1. My name is Dolson. Gore Miser is with me, and Gore, the SPL is back.
Yeah, man, I've been jittery with excitement. It was so exciting that the internet in the office went out, right? It was too powerful to contain.
It was you.
And so, no, it was not me. It could not have been me. Look, I've been sitting here. I was too tired after that first SEC set to be able to get everything through. But I'm really excited to watch it. Look, there's been a couple of things, obviously, like not every single player was able to relocate. And so there's maybe some issues in regards to that. But
right.
We have it back, right? Everyone's ready to play. We're in Phase 1. The kickoff is starting, and I genuinely could not be more excited just to have the SPL just running its course one more time.
Agreed, and another big change is obviously our sponsor here, our title sponsor this year, Alienware. We want to give a big shout-out and a big thanks to Alienware for sponsoring the SMITE Pro League here in Season 8. Make sure to check them out on Twitter and Instagram at Alienware. Join their global community. They've got some great hardware, awesome gaming gear for all the gamers out there. All of our players are going to be playing on their gear this year, so absolute top-of-the-line stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks again to Alienware for sponsoring the SPL here in Season number 8. Gore, we have so much action to go this first weekend. Right off the bat, we've got fantastic matchups. Let's see what week number 1 of the SPL has in store for us. We are starting off today, Tartarus Titans versus the Camelot Kings. Gore and I will sink our teeth into that matchup here in just a moment. And then to round out the day, a couple fan favorites go head-to-head. And a little history between these two teams, Gore Miser.
Yeah.
The Leviathans and the Bolts will go toe-to-toe to round out the day here on Friday. And maybe one of the most anticipated matchups of the weekend start us off on Saturday, Warriors versus the Dragons. Two teams that a lot of people have in their top 3 going on this year. Bolts, Scarabs to round out the day. And then the Dragons once again in action against the Kings on Sunday. And then the Solar Scarabs and Valhalla Valkyries will round out the week. Gore Miser, Tartarus Titans versus the Camelot Kings. So, for a lot of you guys at home, the team names have changed, so you need a refresher maybe if you haven't kept up with all of the off-season drama. Camelot Kings, Variety, Captain Twig, Big Man Tings, Netrioid, and Genetics. Kind of a conglomeration of guys that have all come together, Gore, and they form a pretty formidable team.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what this team has to offer to us. Again, like when I first looked at it, it kind of looks like a team you would put together for, like, if we had grabbed a team from last year, literally, it could have been a charity event team, right? Like, we pluck one from every team and pretty much from all across the standings and put them together. But you have to look at all of the pieces that are coming together here. I think Netrioid and Genetics, like, depending on how well they mesh, both are very accomplished players, and I expect to see a lot out of the duo lane. Same thing, Twig jumping back to the jungle, playing with a bunch of EU brethren at that, right? BMT was one of the most formidable mid laners,
right,
even, that we got to go up or got to watch last year, and that these players got to go up against. So I think there's a lot of strength that's going to be coming down from this team. The thing I am most interested in, though, is Twig, because as you can see, look at these highlights, guess what he was playing last year? Well, it was mid. He was playing mages. Yeah. He was never really jumping around in the jungle. He did still have, I would argue, a very jungleistic style to the mid, and I actually loved that playstyle for mid. I thought it was something that they had that was just different than pretty much every other team. But the question is, can he go back to his roots? This guy played jungle before. He obviously has it in his blood, and we made fun of it a little bit last year because it still fit what we got to see. But how well is he going to adjust to that? How well does Season 8 kind of suit his style of play in the jungle? And what gods is he going to bring? That's really the question I'm looking forward to, because he played, again, a ton of mages last year, some of which have been played in the jungle in the past and have been successful in the jungle in the past. We'll have to see if Season 8 kind of affords them the way, or if it's all the way back to Assassins here for Twig.
Gore, what do you think that adding some extra time in the mid lane, a full season on one of the most successful teams in the league last year, playing in the mid with someone like, Sam there as well, the coordination, do you imagine there's a better understanding of maybe gank potential, the idea of playing around the mid lane? Do you think you gain extra data points in that area if you're Captain Twig? Do mid laners of the league now need to be scared because a guy who's kind of learned the ins and outs of that position has now swapped to a lane that's coming to kill you?
I think to a certain extent, right? I think he's going to have a much more intimate understanding of like when the right times to gank are, when like a mid laner is going to hate seeing the enemy jungler, where like something that would have frustrated him last year, now he can use to his advantage, as you had said. I actually am more interested. This is way more down the line, but like when they play against something like the Dragons, because he knows how their team works now, I want to know how his jungle can disrupt something like that. But here and now, I think that year of experience is definitely going to come in handy.
Well, Gore, we're trying to assume kind of what's going on in the brain of Captain Twig. Well, let's assume no further. I was able to sit down with Twig prior to his matchup today and hear how he's feeling. All right, we are here with Captain Twig. I nearly said mid laner, but now in the jungle for the Camelot Kings. He's going up against the Tartarus Titans here today. Twig, first off, how's the offseason been? It's been a long grind, but we finally made it back to Season 8. How are things going? How are you feeling?
It's been a super fun off-season. I think partly because of Season 8, new Conquest map has been pretty fun, and there's been a new team to kind of get used to on the Camelot Kings.
Yeah, how has that team been meshing here so far? Lots of new faces for you guys to get used to. Netrioid, Genetics there in the duo lane. Big Man Ting's over there in mid. So you know, there's a lot of synergy that needs to be built up. How's that going?
Absolutely. Our duo lane hasn't even been in the same continent yet. And I think there will be a long road of meshing and just creating that perfect team dynamic. But so far, I'm optimistic.
Sure. And variety there in solo, an SPL veteran for sure will absolutely help out. Talk to me a little bit about your transition. Jungle, mid, now back to jungle. How's that been going for you, especially with all these big changes in Season 8?
I think the role swap back has been a little tricky. I thought things would kind of just be the same as they were back in Season 6 when I jungled. I didn't really touch the jungle in Season 7 when I was a mid laner and I had to practice mid. So there will be a little while of me getting back to kind of where I was and maybe surpassing where I was before.
Well, Twig, we know you have it in you. You're a fantastic player. I'm excited to watch your growth and the team's growth throughout the year here in Season 8. Thanks so much for sitting down with me, and best of luck.
Thank you.
I think important words there from Twig. I mean, realistic. It's going to take some time to grow back into this role. It's not like you copy and paste jungle from Season 7 onto Season 8. Lots of changes have happened. He's got a lot to learn. Season 6 to Season 8 is the real transition for him if you want to look back to the last time he was in the SPL at the jungle level. Gore, let's talk a little bit about the Camelot Kings opponents here today, the Tartarus Titans. This is a roster made up of a lot of the Radiance guys from last year and a couple defending world champions. You got Benji in solo, Scary D in the jungle. You heard me right, Scary D in the jungle. Paul out of the mid lane, and then Cyclone Spin and Aurora over in duo. Absolutely a roster that a lot of people have in the top half of the league.
And this is one, it's so difficult. Like, this matchup I'm really excited for just because, like you said, when you highlight the roster that is the Titans, there's so many good, like, just one-on-ones or two-on-twos that we're going to see here, right? Paul going up against BMT, like, that's an awesome mid-lane matchup. So if you're a mid-laner or a mage player out there, like, that's something to pay attention to. Scary, jumping into the jungle, right? Cherio is the coach here for the Titans, so everybody is kind of giving him, I want to say, like, the benefit of the doubt and that kind of trust that you've got someone like Cherio being your guide, like, you're going to do fine in the jungle.
That's
and from what I've heard from, like, Paul and then the rest of the Titans, in the queues at least, and ranked and sometimes in scrims, so far Scary's been having a pretty good time there in the jungle and enjoying himself. So I expect to see something interesting there. I'm really looking forward to that versus Twig matchup. But it's this duo lane that really catches my eye. Aurora and Cyclone have been playing together for longer than pretty much anybody else. I mean, except for maybe Barra and Jeff as a duo. Like, this team, or this two, have stuck together. And Aurora is someone that is just difficult to deal with when he gets his way in game. And right now, I would argue a lot of the gods in his pool are what are considered meta. In fact, part of it because he plays them so well, he is a driving force behind that. I think he is going to be someone you have to deal with. Cyclone, obviously a very accomplished hunter and someone that you have to deal with on his own. A very wide god pool in and of itself. Netrioid Genetics, they don't have the same synergy as this. This is the first year they played together. They don't quite have the same, I want to say, success story that we've seen out of this Aurora Cyclone duo lane, to the point where, I mean, we've credited Aurora and Cyclone for heralding metas in SMITE history, whereas Netrioid Genetics, they play what the meta is incredibly well. So I'm really excited to see what this is going to be. The downside is that there are members of the Kings that are going to be playing with ping, right? That's going to come into it and maybe be a factor that comes through in this. But I think this duo lane, specifically from the Kings, has a lot of potential behind it. I think this is the biggest test you could step into a Game 1 for, is having to go up against a team like Aurora and Cyclone, who have so much history together.
Every single highlight is Aurora and Cyclone Spin in that one together. You can't say the same for Netrioid and Genetics in this matchup. So that is absolutely going to be a massive area where I imagine this one pivots. We've talked a lot about the duo lane for good reason. I sat down with Twig over on the King side of things, but I was able to sit down with Aurora, hear his thoughts going into this matchup. All right, we are down here with Aurora. Of course, the support for the Tartarus Titans are going up against the Camelot Kings here today. So we're going to pick his brain just a little bit. First off, Aurora, new season, a good year for you guys there in Season 7, moving on to Season 8. How have things been? Are you guys ready to get going?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm excited. It's crazy that the season's starting right now. It doesn't feel like it, but once it starts, it will feel like it, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, a lot of build-up time, a lot of excitement and energy with so many changes going on, not only in-game, but around the structure of the SPL. First off, one thing that's not changing, you and Cyclone Spin back for another year in the duo lane. How important do you think that is? I mean, we've seen a lot of duo lanes swap here in the SPL. How important do you think it is that you and Cyclone Spin are able to continue to build on that synergy, especially early on here in Season 8?
Yeah, it's great. I like playing with him. I assume that he likes playing with me too, so it's been a good ride. Yeah, the longer you play with somebody, the more you get to know how they play, the more you know how they are as a person, and you definitely build a really strong bond, and I feel like we've been playing great, and we're going to just continue doing it this year too.
When you're going up against Netrioid and Genetics today, so a fresh look at a duo lane over there for the Kings, so maybe that's an advantage that you guys will be able to find. A big difference, though, obviously you guys add Scary D and Paul to your team. Not much needs to be said about Paul, especially after his World Championship run, but Scary D, he's role-swapping from solo over into jungle. In your experience in playing with him and prepping for this year, how's that change been going for him?
I think it's been going great. I played a lot of ranked with him and just scrimming with him and everything, and the swap for him wasn't that hard because he played a lot of jungle in the past, like just past seasons playing ranked, and he queued a lot with Paul as well. He said the last couple of years is jungle, so I think it's been really good. I think he's a perfect player for the role, and I think he's just going to keep improving with us as a team the entire year, and I think he's going to be one of the greatest junglers this year for the SPL.
Love hearing that, and he's got one of the greatest junglers of all time in Cherio coaching him, so there's certainly that'll certainly help him along his way. Aurora, thanks so much for sitting down with me this morning. Best of luck in your matchup.
Thanks for having me.
Some serious words of confidence there from Aurora. I'll quote him again. He thinks Scary D has the potential to be one of the greatest junglers in the league this year. So when you got the backing of someone like Aurora on your side, no way Scary D can fail. I'm excited to watch that growth as well. Gormizer, kind of final thoughts on this matchup. We're getting ready. Players are ready. These are all played live. We're going to get into picks and bans here shortly. It's hard to, I think, predict matchups like this early on in the year because we truthfully just don't know how well or not the Kings are meshing right now, right? We know that the Titans, they have kind of these groups that played together last year. Scary D and Paul obviously have some synergy. The rest of the guys do. It's hard, I think, to predict exactly how these teams are going to look. But I think the argument would be that the Titans probably have an easier road to build that synergy a little bit quicker.
Yeah, I think they're going to be off to the start much faster than what we see out of someone like the Kings. Especially, again, like I was looking at it, I'd written up some trivia, right, and looking at things that were coming into Season 8. And there's only one, realistically, that you can have, right? We haven't seen anybody play. There's no God stats, no player stats, anything like that. But the other thing that really is coming forward to me is the fact that I had written up the fact that there's 4 players in the league, 5 if you want to count coaches, but 4 that are playing that have pentakills throughout their competitive history. Cyclone Spin holds 2 of those, right? Like, that's, again, one of the accomplishments here the Titans has. Cherio, the coach for the Titans, has one of those if you want to throw him in there. So, like, the thing I'm looking at with the Titans, like you said, is the fact that not only have they had a lot of successful history, but they have had a lot of successful history together. And I think that's going to get them off to a much faster start, like you had highlighted, similar to what we're expecting out of, like, the Warriors and the Dragons than what we're going to see out of the Kings. But the Kings, this is a sleeper team. I think the longer it goes on and throughout this year, they're going to become a very deadly opponent.
Agreed. It's gonna the growth of these teams is gonna be paramount to watch throughout the year. Gore, I don't know about you, but I'm ready to get things going here. Picks and bans for game number 1 of Season 8 of the SPL about to kick off. Now, all of the data we have is from SEC, right? I mean, we've got the EU SEC, the North American SEC. That's what we have really to go off of right now. I think there will be some carryover. There will be very similar picks that we start to see as strong. I mean, all the minds in the SEC are certainly very strong. Immediately jumping out to me, Athena, I imagine she'll continue to be either completely banned or first pick priority throughout most of these matchups. Admittedly, Gore, I am surprised at the Persephone ban. We saw Persephone fall so low. Again, if we're comparing to SEC, Persephone has been falling way down those draft boards, but still so strong here at the SPL level.
This was something that actually it was almost the reverse for me, right? I've been surprised that we haven't been seeing it in the SEC because Persephone, admittedly at the high level, is just really good, right? It's very difficult to think of who, especially in the Pro League, is going to be able to pick her up and not find her. Tiamat, Yamoja, like these picks that have been very prominent and have been in the past, I think are going to continue to do so. And so all of these bands I kind of feel right at home, right? I mean, you add Tiamat in there, that's like the only real new addition to what we would have had. Outside of that, maybe Athena because of the buffs she received pretty recently here in Season 8.
Yeah, if you're excited to see some Tiamat gameplay, you're probably going to have to do it on your own. I doubt she makes her way into any of these SPL games. Again, if she's not banned, maybe she's first pick priority, but haven't seen much of the Tiamat getting through at the SCC level. How about this, Gore Miser? We got a Ymir first pick. The first pick locked in Season 8 of the SPL is a Ymir. This pick is obviously still very, very strong in the eyes of the Camelot Kings. Achilles and Chernobog round out their top 3. I'm very interested and excited, though, Gore. The King Arthur pick here. We've heard rumblings about the ability to dominate lanes with picks like this. And why not give it over to Benji? See what he can do in the first game of the year.
I'll admit I'm a little surprised to see it maybe over something like the Cucullin that we know not only is Benji like fantastic at because he has a skin for Cucullin after him in the game. But I think it's just one of those things that King Arthur has been very prominent. Again, something that I think we've kind of been missing from the lower leagues where we haven't gotten to see him dominate the way that we expect. I think he's maybe eked through one game there, but he really is a dominant force. And again, at this level, I would put him up there with things like the Persephone, like the Cucullin, if you want to compare him directly to things in the solo lane, as a very dominating factor. On her, the Morgan, like this is a combination, the top 3 here for the Titans, that is going to work very well together. Paul, we've seen at Worlds, the most recent that we could have seen it. His Morgan is top tier, so pairing that with an On Her and a King Arthur, I think every single pillar of the 3 lanes is going to be able to find good control.
Whoa, how about this, Gormizer? Kukulkan is going to round out the draft here for the Camelot Kings. That one is surprising. We've seen some standard here so far, but the Kukulkan, admittedly very interesting. Great to pair with some of the setup that the Naja is going to bring to the table. BMT, absolutely fantastic at following up on some of that damage. That's the synergy we're looking for. Remember, this Camelot Kings team, how will Twig and BMT mesh together, and how will Twig obviously mesh with the rest of the team. But let's give Twig something that works. Gore, you're excited about the Bacchus. Break something down here for me, man. There's a lot to look at.
Look, I gotta pull it up because it literally happened Tuesday where he got his update, right? Like, I mean, he just very recently got some small buffs that are going to help him out throughout this. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like, Bacchus has always been really good. Looking at the other team, I think he's going to have a lot of control here. But it's these small buffs to his early game that's really going to be able to help him out. Mana cost on Chug going down, as well as the cooldown on Chug going down. So he's going to be able to have those protections from Chug, and he's going to not have to waste literally all of his mana bar early game just trying to get that going, as well as a little bit of increased damage. Not a lot, but just some there on the Belch of the Gods. I really like Bacchus. I've always really liked Bacchus and his terms of disruption. And this is a weird way to put it. I don't think there's a lot of gods in this game that can really fight Spirit of the Nine Winds from Kukulkan, that ult that really helps confirm things like a Gold Fury and a Fire Giant. But Bacchus, that Intoxicate, it is a great teamfight utility to be able to jump in. It's not going to do nearly the same amount of damage, so you have a much lower threshold to be able to, like, quote-unquote, execute those high-value targets. But it is so important in the middle of a fight. That paired with, like, a Nemesis Morgan being able to potentially become either that Cuckoo or the Ymir or a Bacchus or a King Arthur. Like, there's so many options here. I really like what Titans have for their draft and how they're going to go forward, but I think a lot of pressure really does fall onto Aurora. Like, that Bacchus, admittedly, is the one that needs to be proven out of the other four that are on this team.
And it's Paul playing the Morgan, so that always feels pretty good to me. You got to look at the Kings draft, though. The big question was, obviously, around Twig, his transition back into that jungle role. The duo lane as well, Netrioid and Genetics. So let's assume, and I think this is a pretty safe assumption, it's going to be the Ymir and the Chernobog lane there. If we want to call it forgiving, obviously these guys have been playing together a good bit over the last few months. They've built up that synergy. Do you think that this is the type of lane that can survive against what we will assume will be an all cylinders firing Aurora and Cyclone spin on the other side?
I mean, the biggest thing that we have to look at, I think, is one-to-ones in certain areas. The ult from Chernobog and that capability to be impactful, whether or not he actually joins the fight, right? Some of the slows coming through and the impact that can have. We literally just got to see that in combination with things like the Nemesis. Like, Chernobog is going to be able to slow down the chase that we see out of the jungle, so Scary D's going to have a little bit of work to do. It also does allow him to jump over across the map, something that this Anhur is not going to be able to do. I think in lane, they're going to have some struggles. Bacchus Anhur is very aggressive. Ymir can slow some of that aggression down just because of the merits of being Ymir, but Chernobog isn't really in my mind as that guy I'm thinking of in the first 10 minutes of the game, really, as the end-all be-all of the duo lane. He really is an ult, well, not even an ult bot. He is someone that is a team fighter, right? That is the best way to describe him. Ymir, he can do whatever he damn well pleases if he's having a game, right? Like, with the good walls, with good freezes, I think this Ymir can be just as aggressive. But I do think Cyclone and Aurora are going to be able to control the early portions of this game just because of the gods that they have been able to pick up. I do think, though, when you start to factor in things like this Najah, when you start to factor in, like, the Achilles, the stuns, and the CC that is present here for the Kings, it's going to force out a lot of beads early on. It's going to force relics to be beads. I mean, I won't be surprised if King Arthur has to pick them up. Maybe Bacchus, maybe not quite so much Bacchus on that front, going for something like a shell instead. There's just a lot of CC options for the Kings. Again, a lot of it's going to be team play, how well they mesh together here at the very beginning, but they have a lot of success, a lot to set up this Kukulkan, a lot to set up Chernobog later for success. I think there's a lot of open avenues for the Kings to exploit against the Titans.
Yeah, there certainly doesn't seem to be a complete draft disparity, at least going in to game number one here. God, and then you look at the solo lane matchup, Variety up against Benji. Gore, there is so much excitement, and I will not delay it any further. Camelot Kings, Tartarus Titans, Season 8, Game 1 starts right now.
Well, we are into the game once again, and you see those vines creeping around there in the jungle. One of the biggest additions here in our most recent update to the game. Gonna need 2 autos to get those down. And as considered like a player-made wall, not a lot of other great ways for you to interact with them. That is one of the things we're going to have to see how these SPL teams here deal with them. Aggro, do you expect those to make a whole lot of difference? It seems like in most cases you can just kind of, get right on through here with those couple of autos, but how do you expect that to kind of impact how these teams are moving around?
I think as I've played with the vines, I've become less affected by them. The 2 auto attacks feels like you clear them pretty quickly. So you end up in a position where you can contest more things than I thought you'd be able to. But I do think it affects your god pick at least slightly. You know, these gods with leaps to get over them end up being at least marginally better than what we would see otherwise. So I don't know. I'm not super worried about how they're going to affect the map, but I do think that they factor into picks and bans at least a little bit.
Well, I like to keep my eyes here on Netroid. Already has some pressure. Him and Genetics here in this duo lane. The rest of that old Sanguine squad has moved on, right? I mean, they're on the Leviathans now, moved in Julio to solo, and they seem to be rocking and rolling. I think this is a team with a ton to prove, this Camelot Kings roster, and Netroid in particular, and Tings and Twig all kind of want to show that even without some of those strong teams we're on, they can still be strong here. I think it would be such a great story if Netroid were able to have a really great year here with this team.
Agreed, and I think he's going to. I just think Netroid's super talented. I think that he is one of the premier
really
ADCs in this league. I know. It must have been behind-the-scenes stuff, and we'll have some content coming out sooner rather than later on all of the roster decisions that went through the SPL coming into this year, so you can start getting excited about that. But talk to some of the Leviathans players about it. You'll be hearing their thoughts shortly. But I wanna stay focused on this teleport for Genetics. So he goes it again,
right.
So it's definitely not a misbuy. He picks up the teleport. It's got to be centered around these first buff respawns, because you have to get value out of this teleport really early. Now, he did use it in the first opportunity to see them play, where we had to make the remake. He went over towards blue buff. We'll see what he does this time around, because red buffs are synced. Neither team started on red. Both duo lanes started on purple. Junglers alone at speed. Solo laners alone at blue. And then mid laner and jungler came together for red buff after the first wave. So both buffs are synced up, which means that if Genetic goes to try and invade that red, he's not necessarily there to help secure his own. But based on where Twig is going, I can't imagine a red buff invade is the idea. Blue buff's already up, so Scary D's already there. It looks to me like Genetics isn't going to be using this teleport for the very first respawn of buffs, which is where I think that this would be the most valuable, because you start with Boots 1, be able to back after the first few waves with enough gold for Boots 2, or Boots 3 rather, full Boots, then you teleport back in and you're the strongest player on the map as Demir with full Boots. I wonder what he's going to do with it, because that's already we're kind of past the point where I'm expecting it to make the most surprising play.
Yeah, and he lost a little bit of that, as you've already kind of covered. With that first attempt there from him. So
right.
We'll see what the idea is, because on the other side, Aurora has this Sunder, and I think it's real clear how that's planning on getting its value. Next to 0% chance that's not hitting the intended target on the back of a flop or something to that effect. It's Captain Twig that wants to be the one starting the fights off first. It's Sash into Windfire Wheel. Scary D lands, and Big Man Tings get your first blood of Season 8, and that is one of Cuckoo's big strengths. Not a whole lot that are better at following up than him.
Scary has got to be careful about where Twig is at any given time, because the Twig-Tings combo is just too easy from that position. No beads for Scary D. I'm a little surprised that he doesn't go beads, because that combo is just so lethal. And it's not just that combo. I mean, you're talking a Ymir freeze spells instant death for this Nemesis. Scary, I mean, obviously a huge talking point for this Titan squad, swapping to the jungle. He kind of gets a rude awakening for his first SPL game in the role. Definitely not the start he wanted.
Not at all, but Big Man Ting's now level 7, highest on the map, and even a bit ahead of Paul. And we know the kind of impact that Paul can have when he's able to get his game started off on the right foot. Listen, we're just going to celebrate the victories for Tings. Maybe not the tornado. Not quite getting exactly what we wanted there, but like, I think that it kind of goes a bit by the wayside. I know we've been talking about it kind of on the cast, but you kind of don't see Tings getting quite enough credit for how impactful he was on that Radiant squad. But Variety's the one who might need to be careful. Has Benji low, but the rotation's here. Execute up, and Variety finds it anyway in the 1v2. Scary D, though, on the hunt, has the slow, so should be hard for Variety to escape, but backup is on the way. Twig finds the Sash, and great work from the Kings all across the map.
Wow, Scary. I mean, he's usually the one over here in the solo lane hoping that his jungler blocks the Fatal Strike for him, but instead it goes the other way. Scary can't get in front of that Fatal Strike. A little bit of miscommunication on where to stand. I mean, in those situations, the best thing you can do is just have someone who understands, all right, in these sorts of situations, I'm either standing still or you're standing still and I'm getting behind you, you know, those players that have played together for a long time, they've done those sorts of plays a whole lot. They understand what the other player's looking to do. Benji and Scary maybe not on that same wavelength quite yet, and it results in the second kill of the game going the Kings' way.
A great start here for the Kings, and we also just saw another great discussion point. That Greater Scorpion, as Gore would have me say, Forp on that right side, has already gone down. And a question of what the timing in is those has been interesting, but I think on the Fire side, a bit less, right? You're kind of okay with Pyromancer coming up any time. For sure, you're not worried about Fire. Go ahead and grab it when you can, get those enhanced buffs, as Aurora can't quite find the knock left. So is that how you see it? You know, maybe there's a little bit more over there on the Gold Fury side than you worry about on Fire side?
Yeah, so for two reasons. Number one, let me explain the nomenclature, because Goremiser's got it right. Instead of saying Greater Scorpion on Gold Fury side or Greater Scorpion on Fire Giant side, which is just a mouthful, we're going with Gorp for Gold Fury side Greater Scorpion and Forp for Fire Giant side Greater Scorpion. And that is credit to Snoopy, because otherwise I'm going to never hear the end of it. So I agree that taking the Gorp earlier is a little bit scarier to me, because you end up opening up a Gold Fury rush early game where it's really easy for you to lose a fight, then lose Gold Fury, and then all of a sudden you're down by a lot more gold, because Gold Fury won't spawn until Gorp is killed. However, on the right-hand side of the map, it not only makes more sense because there's way less threat of you losing a subsequent objective by killing that Greater Scorpion, but also because the right side buff enhancements are better in the early game. The lifesteal in the early stages, and really in the late stages on Enhanced Red, not nearly as impactful. The extra attack speed feels good on purple no matter what, but that's kind of it. On the right-hand side, rather, as Twig actually misses his ultimate, gonna eat Scaries.
Yeah, but this time, it just means that Twig has more friends, so they win the fight to start, but Twig in trouble in the back. Benji and Aurora work together to punish him, and Netrioid getting involved. Staying over and left, just dropping the ultimate. Paul takes care of Genetics. And that's pretty big for the Tartarus Titans to find a couple of response kills. This early game has not been great for him. Variety wants to try and step up and contest that blue, but with Aurora's presence, easy enough for Benji to make sure that goes over on his side. So yeah, in the end, I think Twig missing that ult hurts a lot more than maybe it initially looked like.
Would have bought a lot more time for the Kings to get there in force, but instead it's actually Variety in trouble now on this right-hand side. Aurora lurking, but Fatal Strike gets Variety out of danger. But this is a good sign for the Tartarus Titans, because that early pressure on the right was really setting up Benji for failure in this game. Variety was getting a subsequent lead, but with this help, maybe they can make it work, though now Aurora has found himself in a bad spot. Tings has the ult, and he's walled off perfectly by Genetics. Who needs good ping when you got mechanics like that between Tings and Genetics?
Yeah, it didn't look like they had miscommunication or a bad ping there. Hard to ask for a better wall than what Genetics just played. Made the ult from Tings look a little bit better, if I'm being honest, really, by dropping that. But now it's the Greater Scorpion on the left-hand side going down. Netroid and Genetics opening this up. But we just talked about how important this timing can be. But they're doing it right when Oracle spawn. They'll dominate the vision on this left side of the map and are going to be coming in with just a bit of a timing advantage. Look at how the beads are down a little bit, Sunder down that right-hand side. Maybe Camelot Kings, if there is a quick fight, there might not be, would come in with a bit of an advantage, so wouldn't feel too bad about dropping this right now.
I think that it's a good opportunity to fight, because you also can use the enhanced buffs that you just created on your side of the map to influence the subsequent Gold Fury fight. So what you could see the Kings do is drop these buffs, upgraded, pick them up, back and buy, and set up for a Gold Fury fight on Tings' ultimate timer, because he's got 20% CDR, he's got a decent amount.
Now Twig getting aggressive again, but the transformation coming out from Paul, he's using it to back up a bit, as the ultimate from the Cuckoo does not quite connect in Aurora, despite having been in trouble, is A-okay, and that is a pretty big important cooldown for Paul, down for a bit. He transformed into the Nemesis on reaction, and wasn't able to find much more on the backside.
Look, that's still a win for Kings, no doubt about it. Not only do you get Paul's ultimate, but more importantly, you get his beads as well. Yeah, sure. Twig uses his ult, Tings uses his ult. 10% CDR for Twig, 20% for Tings between his boots and that Sands of Time. So you're going to be able to get those ultimates back up with plenty of window in order to try and punish this Morrigan. I would love to see the Kings try and play around a Gold Fury and just bait in the Tartarus Titans, because not only do they guarantee to have the best secure on the map, when that Spirit of the Nine Winds is up. But now, Paul's not going to be feeling comfortable to flank you, which is usually the big concern when there's a Morrigan on the other team, or try and transform into something like the Cuckoo and try and get in there and out-secure you with your own ultimate. I think this is a good opportunity.
And the Fury being started up. The Camelot Kings have it pulled. Cyclone Spin and Aurora, the duo, are on their way. But if Ting can get his ult up in time, there's not much they can do to contest. The Fury has been reset. The Tartarus Titans have forced the retreat from the Kings and defended the Fury for now. I think that without that ultimate right there, maybe they didn't want to keep pushing, or maybe they didn't know it was just Aurora and Cyclone Spin on the way.
Yeah, they don't have perfect ward coverage, but good enough to feel comfortable to pull that for sure. I think that Genetics and Netrioid just pulled it 2 seconds too early, 2-3 seconds too early, because Ting's ultimate came up right as they decided to reset it, and Genetics is knowing that he's taking a little bit too much damage, he's out of position, Netrioid's out of position. They're just really trying to roll the dice and wait on that Ting's ultimate perfectly timed. But if you just wait 2 seconds, you can still have Aurora and Cyclone beating on you. It's really that Gold Fury damage that you don't want to be holding. And then Tings can ult from a comfortable distance away, knowing that his ultimate's not, that it's up, and don't have to be just spamming that forward to make sure it comes out on time. So I think just a little bit of a misreaction by the Kings.
But isn't it clear what the Kings' game plan is here, though? It's this early aggression. Twig constantly looking for these solo picks where you can have Tings follow up, and then just pressure on these objectives. They tried to get Fury. Sure, they had to give that one up, but they forced the Titans to rotate into it, and then when that didn't pan out, fine. We'll just come right on over to Pyromancer and grab that instead. I like this kind of concise, clear early game strategy from the Kings, and it's putting the Titans to the test as Twig does find a sash, but does not get an overreaction out of Cyclone.
I mean, Twig is the leader of all of the tempo right now on the map. He is the... Twig and Genetics are running the way this map is flowing right now, and Scary D and Aurora have really been trying to just get their farm and then be wherever the Kings are. That's been the game plan. I mean, the 2 kills for the Titans are because the Kings initiated a fight on their side of the map that ended up not going well, but it's the Kings the ones who are being the initiators and the aggressors, which for me I think is always the better way to do it. It's always way easier to play good Smite when it's going according to your game plan and you're not trying to formulate a counter plan to what the enemy team is doing. I wonder, you know, how much of that is the Kings just working well as a unit, but also having Twig in the jungle who just knows how he wants to play the map and how he wants to flow through his farming route, whereas Scary D is still trying to reach that same level of cover.
The Titans know that the Fury's been pulled by the Kings. They've got a low already. There's the knockup, but you can't out-secure the Cuckoo God ultimate, and the Kings grab the very first Fury of the game, but they want Genetics in response. They already put the Nim ultimate on him, but it's not enough. Wall up, and the Kings are on the retreat, so Benji comes in, uses the ultimate, and grabs Genetics on the backside. He finds a freeze, and that gets a return kill. The Kings come roaring out of the gates.
That's a great trade for the Kings, and they might want to keep going because Variety has the long flank ready to go. Netrioid's already used that Living Nightmare, so not going to be able to use that to chase them down as Paul slips through Variety's fingers back into the mid lane, but still a 1-for-1 jungler for support and the Gold Fury on the side of the Kings. And it's the exact same thing we were talking about just a minute ago. It's the Kings who are setting the pace. They're forcing the Titans to come in and engage on their terms, and the Titans' composition isn't quite as good at that as what the Kings are at doing these initiations. I mean, you look at what someone like the Morrigan wants to do. When there's already AoE ability, you know, ring toss is in the air, it's difficult for Paul to find an angle where that's not going to chunk him as he's coming in stealth and reveal him and leave him slowed and very vulnerable. If you're the Titans composition, you want Aurora and Benji up front with Cyclone and Scary right behind in order to set up and get that damage off and allow Paul to come in from these flanks. With how the map is playing right now, the Kings have such a gold lead that they're going to be able to get good ward coverage. That's a Morrigan's worst nightmare, and set themselves up for really good opportunities in these team fights.
Well, Netroid forcing Cyclone
He's
Spin's
got him.
ultimate out, and now Cyclone Spin forced to use the Aegis, but
Oh,
how
Paul!
can he escape? But there's backup. Paul comes in as the Chernobog, and Cyclone Spin gets the last laugh. And that is what you mean about the Morrigan. Her greatest strength is when she's sneaking in undetected.
Great call by the Tartarus Titans. I don't know if Cyclone called for the help or if Paul was ready to do it, but Netrioid had him dead to rights in that lane. No chance he loses the 1v1. But the 2v1 though, that's a different story. Paul comes in on the cavalry basically to come and save the day, and not only do they save Cyclone Spin's life and kill Netrioid, but they also get both of Netrioid's actives as well. So even though his ultimate is up and can rejoin the fight if necessary, if a fight were to break out as soon as he respawns, he's going to be pretty vulnerable doing so. Huge play for the Titans, and now you feel like they have at least one area, one lane, where they can potentially lean on to get some lead back.
Oh, I thought Netrioid had picked up that short sword for a minute, but looks like he sold it and went for the attack speed route instead. It's Ickfile in to what you got to think is going to be Ken's or maybe an Executioner form, and Cyclone Spin is indeed on this crit route with the 8-point Shuriken. Going to be bringing in a little bit more crit on the backside of that. So it looks like Netrioid's making a bit of an adjustment. He likes taking these 1v1 duels. With this Ickfile, is it reasonable for him to be able to fight even Scary D at this point? He's got a pretty big lead over him, so I'd imagine so. He's in a point where he's looking to kind of stand his ground and respond when the trouble gets there.
Absolutely, and he can do it really well. I mean, Churtabog very good in those 1v1 scenarios because you have an attack speed stim that does damage on the front end, and that can be really difficult to deal with. His passive factors in, and then of course the Ichabod just so good in those one-on-one scenarios. It's why Netrioid was crushing Cyclone in the 1v1. It was really the, obviously mechanics play a huge role, but the build difference, Netrioid was very intelligent in going for that trade, knowing the difference in their builds. The Executioner for Cyclone not nearly as good at fighting the enemy ADC one-on-one.
Pyromancer taken by the Kings. On the back of their aggression, Variety is in the back. They're looking for Scary D, who's way too squishy. Perfect wall from Genetics, but the follow-up still is not there. Variety having to chase on his own and cannot find the execute, so Scary D makes his way out. The ultimate from Tings connects with a roar, and Twig is there to clean it up, but impaled by Cyclone Spin, making his way into the battle. But it's the Titans who are scattered, as great work from Paul to turn into the CC immune Variety that allows him to escape with the ultimate, because he was in trouble off that wall from Genetics. Ends up being 1-for-0 in favor of the Kings.
It just feels like the Kings have all the momentum right now. I mean, nothing that Tartarus Titans are throwing at them seems to be working as a tier 1 tower and mid goes down. Love the way that the Kings have just used their CC in this game. Genetics has looked phenomenal so far on this Ymir. Still a little skeptical of this teleport. I wonder, I'm looking for how ineffective or effective it's going to be. Yeah, I mean, it didn't really do that much for them early game, but it certainly hasn't hurt him too much. All he needs is the blink, it feels like. Love the build that he's gone for. Winged Blade, an old classic on Ymir. It's better than it's ever been because now it has some protections on it, and it's great in this game up against the Anhur and the Nemesis, two characters that are going to slow you consistently. Genetics has been a real factor so far.
Oni Fury in the sights now of the Camelot Kings. The Titans not yet in position to contest, and truly, how can they contest when it's the Cuckoo ult on the other side? Netrioid does drop his beads, gives respect over to Aurora, potentially landing that stun. So the Tartarus Titans get something in response, but this game is out of control already. It's a 6,000 gold lead for the Kings, and the Titans struggling to come up with any kind of answer.
Yeah, don't love that use of purification beads there by Netrioid. Think that probably, I don't know if his dash was down, but ends up being a little bit more difficult, I think, for him to play aggressive with those beats down. As good as the CC has been for the other side, the Titans have a good amount of CC on their own end as well. So I think that Netrioid's got to be a little bit careful now after using those purification beads when maybe he didn't really need to.
A little cautious there from Netrioid on the left-hand side, perhaps. It was indeed the Executioner for him next. Afterwards in his build. Meanwhile, Cyclone Spin seems to be all in on the crit. Already has the Wind Demon short sword right behind it. And that might be a bit of a way for the Titans back in. Some big crit damage on someone who's not suspecting it, but I mean, even Twig, Shifter Shield on Keeley and the Wing Blade have a bit more survivability than you expect. You might need to get to Tings or Netrioid for that to have the effect they actually want. As there's a skirmish here over in right. Benji and Scary take a little bit of a battle up against Variety and Twig, and the Kings are the one with backup on the way. So the Titans retreat, don't want any more of this action. But even though this game is, pretty thoroughly in Camelot Kings' control, we've seen games way more than this where the other team has come back. I'm not counting the Titans out just yet.
Agreed. I mean, the Titans are a team that has so much veteran experience on their side that you definitely can't count them out. I mean, how many games did Paul and Scary D win last year where it looked like they had no shot?
Yep.
Almost all of their finals games, / all of their semifinals games and quarterfinals games. That's what this team was really, really adept at. So you know that those guys, at the very least, are quite comfortable in this position. But I'm also sure that they wish they were in a better position than they are in right now. I'm surprised at the prevalence of the Spear of the Magus pickups here, Finch. I mean, no desolation for Big Man Tings. I guess it makes sense if you're going for this Pendulum of Ages, which he's already picked up. He's able to upgrade his starter very early on. With both Pendulum of Ages and cooldown boots, if you whenever you go for a power pot, you would be 10% overcapped, but I feel like the Deso passive is so good I wouldn't mind.
No, not at all, but we have seen some variance here in these mid-lane mage builds and where they want to go. So this is where Tings feel comfortable and hard to complain when he's having such a good game. Looks like the Camelot Kings are not going to slow down their pressure, though. Fire Giant, the next thing in their sights. They already have it started up. Benji, Scary D, and Aurora are all nearby, though, within shouting distance of catching up to the fire. Good freeze from Genetics. It's too low. In comes the ultimate, and the Kings secure the Fire Giant cleanly. It looks like they're going to take the fight on the backside. At least that's what the Titans would love. Netroid goes back in with the ultimate on the wrong side of the wall, makes his way with his dash towards safety, and now the Kings indeed are looking to turn it around.
And this is where that lead comes into play. This wall walls off Cyclone Spin, keeps Benji on their side. Benji falls, as does Aurora. I think the Titans are getting routed.
That's it for Paul. It's a double kill for Big Man Ting. Cyclone Spin falls as well. And the Camelot Kings in about as comfortable a position as you could ask for, as now they have all 5 members, just Scary D up on the other side, and plenty of towers to collect the lead. About to get a whole lot worse for the Tartarus Titans, as they can just push right on down right. No reason this isn't a Phoenix, maybe even a little more.
Yeah, I think that you're going to be able to get quite a bit here for the Kings. Their throne feeling awfully comfortable right now, I feel like, Finch. They are sitting pretty here in game number 1. This right side Phoenix is absolutely toast, and it's just the Tartarus Titans. I mean, on that Fire Giant fight, I kind of agree with what the Titans' assessment was that we're not getting a better fight than this. With the Cuckoo ultimate already down, we know that they've taken some damage. Sure, we could just give up fire. The Titans, they're smart players. They know that Fire Giant is basically gone to Tings' ultimate guaranteed. But it's the matter of, should we fight this now and have at least a 5-10% chance of winning the fight versus waiting to be sieged upon on our Phoenixes when we're this far behind with a Morrigan, who I think is very weak on siege defense. Not only is her wave clear not perfect, but it's hard for her to get into the back line, though easier with the doors than it was before. I just think that was the right fight for the Titans to take, even if it doesn't work out, because I don't see them winning a fight from this position. Not anymore.
It's going to be real difficult for them, isn't it? Take a look at how Camelot Kings are rounding out some of these builds. Brawlers there for Twig. The Obshard there for Tings. Sob and Rage now starting to get stacked. Mantle of Discord. These are some items to start closing the door on the Tartarus Titans, aren't they? I mean, to get plenty more damage out of the backline, to shred through who they need. And it's going to be a lot harder killing anyone on the frontline side of the Camelot Kings here. If you are the Tartarus Titans, it's just a difficult path. And they've cleaned up this map well. The right side completely exposed. They got that Phoenix earlier. The tier 2 was split push by Twig while the rest of the team was on right. The tier 2 in mid, rather. And now the Kings are cleaning up over here on the left. About as good of a Fire Giant power play as you could ask from this team. And they've done everything clinically from the beginning of this game. They came in with a game plan, and they're executing on it near flawlessly.
Yeah, never once did it feel like the Titans were in control of this match. I mean, it's been Kings from minute 1 now to minute 25. And, of course, in Season 8, these starter item upgrades are a huge power spike for these players. Not only are you ahead because you're now level 20 and max level, but now you get to upgrade these starters. And 4 out of 5 have done it for the Kings. Interesting that Genetics chose not to go into the Compassion, instead finished off that Sovereignty, Whereas you look on the other side, you're looking at a protector of the jungle from Scary D. He's lucky to get into the jungle from this position. You're not going to be getting that passive benefit here underneath your Phoenix.
Genetics doing big damage up there as he brings a roar down low. That is also the Desert Fury and the ultimate from Scary D all expended. Left side Phoenix Siege resumes, and the Camelot Kings seem to have the resources. In comes Benji. That does get the beads out from Netrioid, but in the back, Tings' ultimate caused all kinds of problems, and now Variety trying to keep up the chase, get some backup from Twig, looking plenty comfortable back in the jungle as he takes care of a Cyclone Spin. That is it for the duo lane of the Tartarus Titans. And the Camelot Kings going to keep up there efficiently, keep up how well they've been dotting their I's and crossing their T's by coming back from the mid-Phoenix. And Genetics now getting some TP value.
Absolutely massive TP pickup from Genetics. TP walk-up freeze, baby. You love to see it.
He's going to win the game down a Relic.
Yeah, he sure is. At this point, sash in from Twig, Paul, nowhere to go. 3 in a row for Variety. And the Camelot Kings come out purple robes, squeaky clean from game number 1. No doubter from them to kick off Season 8.
Yeah, this didn't feel like a team that was adjusting to a new roster and playing from halfway across the planet and down a Relic on their support. Instead, it looked like a team that was kind of just waiting for the boxes to get filled in, right? Everything was going to the way that they drew it up nearly exactly. There's no team in the SPL that I think that you can completely write off whatsoever, but it sure ain't the Camelot Kings if you're going to insist that one of those teams exists.
No, definitely not them. And I think that our discussion that we had at the very beginning of this game comes back to me in my mind after watching that game. Who is going to be the leader for this Tartarus Titans squad? They looked without direction. Lost is too strong a word. They clearly understand what they're supposed to be doing, but they didn't come in with a coherent game plan. Here's what we're going to do at this point. Here's what we're going to do at this point. Whereas Genetics and Twig really ran the map perfectly for this King squad. Very impressed with what I saw from them, and I'm hoping that the Titans can step up and give us a better showing in Game 2.
They know what the Kings like to do now. Let's see if the Titans can make an adjustment. That will all be happening, though, on the other side of this break.
And games like that is exactly why we say it's hard to predict exactly who is going to be Good, bad, somewhere in between this early on into the season. Camelot Kings win game number 1 of SPL Season 8. And if you're somebody who's at home looking for a new team to rep, you see all this sweet merch we've got and you don't know who, and now maybe you're a Kings fan, jump on over to, what is it? shop.smiteproleague.com. I should know these things, but apparently I don't. Insight Apparel Company, they're our sponsor here, and we partnered with them to bring awesome gear and jerseys and merch for all of the SPL teams that we have going on. Shop.smiteproleague.com. I got it right the second time. Ramsey's blocking my light in the back corner there. Fantastic. It's all going so well here for me. Gore Miser joins me to break down game number 1, though, Gore. Admittedly, totally the opposite, I think, of what we kind of expected going in. I mean, we had these expectations set for these rosters. And then a little bit surprising, I think, that it was actually the Titans that looked a little bit wayward.
Yeah, I mean, they just meshed so well together there for the Kings. I think we were expecting more of a warm-up period, but I guess they got their warm-up period during the offseason, right? Like, I thought it was still going to take a little bit, because, you know, going from scrims to actual Pro League games, there's usually at least a little bit of stutter step, right? Like, it doesn't matter how much you've spent time together, playing together, there's always going to be a little bit of a buffer. But they looked so solid this game. Of course, you have to highlight this look. Playing from European ping, hitting a lot of these. That one was a little easy there. I'm going to go ahead and give the credit there more to Twig than to Tings for that one. But I think Tings was a phenomenal force throughout all of this game. I think it was very difficult to deal with, not only him, but again, look at all the setup that kind of came in there. That sash, unfortunately, going a little wide, but all of the stuns and control to be able to lock down and ensure ults like that, damage like that, and just giving Big Man Tings one of the best performances I think we've gotten to see on this guy. Of course, rocking the old school skin as well to top it off, just to make sure you know he has been around and doing this for a little bit longer than I think everyone else has been able to. And right there, I mean, just kind of a blind 2-man ult. There's so much to highlight on this team, but I think that mid lane was really crucial for helping them find the victory.
And Gore, look, if you're a Captain Twig fan, and look, he had a good year in the mid lane last year. Let's not mince words, but it's refreshing, right, to see him drive the speed of a game in the way that he did there in game number 1. It felt like that jungle pick paired with Big Man Tings, and that's a storyline we wondered if we would see. Great synergy between mid and jungle, and now that Twig has had a year at the highest level over in the mid lane, we saw a little bit of that there in game 1. So I think refreshing, probably for no one more so than Twig himself, but fans of this Kings team, fans of Twig himself, he's showing signs of greatness already. 1 game in, obviously we now need to establish consistency to see how it's going to go, but we've shown that the transition back to jungle is there. But again, I think BMT has to be maybe the highlight of the game here. He was so consistent last year for that Radiance team, one of the most consistent mid laners, I think, in all of the SPL in Season 7. So again, if we're starting to establish trends, if we see this continued play out of Big Man Tings, it's going to be a very scary 3v3 to deal with. And then Genetics gets teleport on Ymir. I mean, what is going on here? This 3 versus 3 looks so strong for this Kings team. Let's jump into picks and bans, though, Gore Miser, for game number 2. That was a first pick Ymir, remember? So it's going to be a first ban Ymir. The teleport Ymir draws a ban from the Titans. You got to be kidding me. All right, so that then is going to open something up. Granted, the Titans will have that first pick, so something opens up for them to grab if it is left there. Tiamat's still around. They're going to ban Cerberus as well. Playing with house money are the Titans in that first pick spot.
Yeah, Athena, Yamoja, 2 tanks that were banned last time, not banned this time around. Persephone set makes sense. The Achilles, so all 3 of the rotationary bans here from the Titans is specifically to target out what the Kings did. And again, you get pick of the litter, but there's a certain number, right? When you are wiggling around and working with your first pick, now you have to decide, do we like Yamoja? Do we like Athena? Like, which of these top tier picks that we did not ban do we like more? Because with them banning 3 there on the Titans, that means the Kings are going to get 2, right? So they kind of almost played themselves. No matter what they pick, even if it's the number 1, the Kings get number 2 and number 3 on that list. They're going to be feeling pretty solid for themselves. And while 2 mid laners were banned out, there's a lot of Assassins, a lot of Guardians that are a high priority right now, still available.
Well, Yamoja draws the pick over what we assume, again, this is all assumption, will at some point be an Athena pick for one of these two teams. Remember, we have seen Athena in solo, we've seen Athena in jungle, we've seen Athena in support. So still could happen for this Titans team if Athena is left open down the stretch here. I love the fact, and I think you love this if you're a Kings fan, that we've already seen 2 respect bans immediately drawn after game 1, Ymir. And then I think Variety had a great game on the Achilles as well, weaving through some of those executes, controlling that front line. So if you're a Kings fan, you're loving the fact that there's already 2 gods that are respect banned away from a couple of the guys on your team. On her, Gormizer, first pick overall, followed by the Kukul Khan. A fantastic 1-2 punch of damage. Kings have already got their their back line, sorted.
I mean, it is a day, right? Like, on her I could see, but even if with a great performance, Kukul Khan being picked up over a lot of other things here does admittedly surprise me. Go back to last year, he was a very prominent pick during Phase 1, so it's not maybe as surprising as it could be. We know this is a very solid mage, but number 2 overall over things like the Heimdall and the Guan Yu, like, I feel like this top 3 for the Titans is objectively stronger, whereas the top 2 for the Kings so far, maybe this top 3 depending on what they lock in right here, is going to be based on what they just did better, because this Kukul Khan was incredibly good for them. On her, was able to fit the ropes. We did almost see, I believe it was Cyclone getting soloed, but he got saved there towards the very end. And so I think it's interesting to see now that the On her on the other side, what it's going to be able to do and what he'll be able to bring. But this is a really solid, again, top 3 over there for the Titans. And look at Ramsey.
Yeah, there's your.
She's into this.
She's
invested. She wants to know what the next pick is.
It's your first official Ramsey update of the year. When I had her last year, she was what, 2, 3, 4 months old,
pounds?
maybe. She's 2, 3, 4 pounds, months old, whatever it may be. She's 8 months old and 33 pounds nowadays. So Ramsey, there's your official Ramsey update, day 1 here of season 8 of the SPL. Gormizer, Ramsey's eyes are locked on the screen here. Mine are as well. Guan Yu, you've mentioned, fell down the draft board just a little bit here. Surprising given what we've seen at the SCC level. And then Sun Wukong there as well. So we've got now another, what should be very interesting, aggressive, dualistic matchup out of that soul lane by gods that can then transition that into controlling the backline so well for your team.
I mean, I want to hyper focus in on it, but I see that Najah ban. It's just another respect ban out, right? That's coming through. Either way, like you said, Guan Yu, I expect to have a little bit better of a time than Wukong. At the end of the day, both of them are very prominent solo laners, like you said. Bluestone Wukong, it's back, of course, here in Season 8, so I expect this to be a very prominent and pretty early game Wukong that comes through, at least in terms of lane presence. Then, of course, late game, he'll do the same things he was doing last year. I think very, very prominent in the middle of a team fight and very successful with all that. Now paired with an Athena on the front line, I think that is going to be a really formidable duo of the frontline players to have to deal with, especially a taunt into a slow or any sorts of damage that Wukong can come and bring up. It's going to be a lot of setup once again for this Kukul Khan. It's going to make it a lot easier to hit those ults, a lot easier to really connect on a lot of these things and get the damage out there. So the Kings, their front line is just playing, I would argue, the best way you can, which is we're going to set up our backliners for success. We're going to let them find all the freest damage we can in the world, and we're just going to win because of it.
Gore, let me ask though, I mean, you ban out Ymir as a respect ban, you ban out the Achilles as a respect ban. I'm being yelled at for not petting the dog, so I'll pet the dog. Are you surprised that Cerberus is the pick that ends up, or the ban rather, that ends up getting drawn out here by the Titans instead of something like the Kukul Khan? Big Man Tings look near unstoppable with a little bit of setup there in game number 1, and it's now given right back to him with maybe even more setup here in game number 2, a big Athena taunt into a Spirit of the Nine wins. I mean, you're not sashing one target and deleting them. You're pulling 2-3 people in at a time, potentially. And now a Horus? I got to admit, Gore, I'm a little surprised the Kukul Khan makes its way through into Big Man Tings' hands once again.
I would pass that off very simply as I think, like, we can deal with that, right? Like, a Kukul Khan, there's some specific things, like maybe not direct counters, but he's a noodle that can zoom fast sometimes. Like, he's not theoretically very difficult to deal with if you can get the jump on him. But the downside is he does a lot of damage, and Now that I see a Horus, an Athena, and a Wukong, he's got so much peel that he's going to be safe back there.
Right.
It's one of those things, like you had said the Cerberus instead of the Kukulkan. I'm kind of looking at Cerberus instead of something like the Athena. Like, if you know you're not going to pick it, you know you're
Fair
going
point.
for the Emoja, what are you going to shift for? Because now they've got Athena, who I think is phenomenal. Horus, that I still have as a personal favorite in the support role. I think he is a very, very competent god, and I love playing him. Wukong over there for the solo lane, or Wukong jungle Athena solo, whichever way they want to juggle that one, is going to be very prominent and very much featured in the center of this map. And I think that you have a plan over here if you're the Titans. Their top 3 are really strong. Your bottom 2, Xbalanque, a very late game carry. Ao Kuang, a very late game carry. I
Yeah,
think the
right.
Titans are hoping to just stay powerful and prominent long enough to have those big power spikes come online.
Gore, I mean, I've been so enthralled by the Kings draft. It's a Heimdall Xbalanque. One of the 2 of those is going to have to go towards the mid lane, you
Oh,
assume.
yeah,
so it's
wait.
a double hunter. I'm so interested by what's being drafted to set up for the Kukulkan. What do we think of this Titans draft? Double hunter in the 2nd game of the year.
I feel like this is, if I had to call it, I'd think Heimdall mid. I feel like we've seen that a little more than Xbalanque, and honestly, it's mainly because if I close my eyes and think, you know, Cyclone Spin, I start to see Xbalanque. Like, it feels like a pick he would go to and a pick that he has manifested well in the past, so I expect to see him do well on it here. They could, like you said, shift that up. Honestly, you've got Emoja with you. I don't think it matters who's over there in the dual lane. You're going to have a lot of pressure, and that's going to help alleviate whatever on her plus Horus is going to be able to do. And that's the biggest thing. I think if you can bully Horus in those first couple of minutes before his heal is very prominent, and
hard to
more
do.
so before his prot shred is very prominent, that is going to be nice. But again, it's very difficult because you have like 2 levels, 3 levels max before he's going to have pretty much all of his kit online. And he's really good as a deterrent. He's good at healing away from his team and keeping them safe. So I think between him and on her, it doesn't matter how much pressure you have. You might be able to push them under tower, and you'll keep them where
Right.
their minions aren't very comfortable. But I don't think On Her and Horus themselves are really under threat here. I think the Kings have a very safe draft in terms of survivability. The one that would arguably die the most would be Tings here on the Kukulkan, but I don't think he's going to have any trouble. I just saw what happened last game. I think he's feeling just fine over there, especially against an Ao Kuang who isn't going to have a very early presence against him. He's going to take a little while to get online. I'd love to see what Scary D can do here, but this is one that I'm not entirely sure about. The Nemesis didn't work out. I think this is a completely different style of play, but in terms of trying to get to the back line easily, at least for the, again, first 15 minutes or so, I don't expect a lot of that pressure to be coming from the jungle.
Right, and it's going to be so important for this Heimdall and the Xbalanque as well to be able to consistently outpour that damage, right? I mean, Kukulkan,
Yeah.
you send the Spirit of the Nine Winds through, a tornado hits the ground, and you've effectively deleted the squishy target that you're looking at. These hunters need some uptime in these fights. This game is going to be won and lost in the trenches, I feel like. The Emoja Guan Yu front line versus the Sun Wukong Athena Horus front line. I mean,
Yes.
this is going to be one... You got to feel like Goran, who's able to buy their backline enough time to operate, because these hunters, they might get deleted very quickly if they get taunted on in. Game number 2, Camelot Kings, Tartarus Titans, Finch and Aggro.
Thank you on the desk there, Dolson and Gore, as we move into game number 2. Indeed, Finch and Aggro here, Tartarus Titans and Camelot Kings for this action. And Aggro, to me, for the Kings, this is feeling like a tainted steel, cursed Ankh kind of game when you've got Guan Yu and Yamoja over there on the other side. Is this a game where the Kings kind of have to win the fight quickly, or they're going to struggle in a long, prolonged fight against all this healing?
Yeah, I think so, because it's not only just the healing, but you want to talk about sustained DPS in a team fight. Hunters are the best for that. So no traditional mage here for the Tartarus Titans. Instead, they've got Ao Kuang in the jungle. I think Ao Kuang's in a really strong spot right now. I wouldn't be surprised if more junglers started picking him up at the SCC and SPL level. I like the pick quite a bit here for Scary. Paul, one of the premier mid lane hunter players in the league. Of course, Dardes is the premier mid hunter player in my mind, but Paul not too far behind. He's really impressed me whenever he picks up these types of gods. I just think that the Titans have gone with something that is unmess-upable come late game. That's the way I look at this composition. Like, you just have more sustain, you have more sustained DPS, whereas the Camelot Kings is about synergy and being on point as a unit once again. I mean, you've got this setup for this Kukulkan and for this On Her. You've got double setup between the Athena and the Horus. I think the Kings composition really comes online right around that 15 to early 20 minutes mark. I think they're definitely stronger than the Titans on the first few 5v5s. But if we get to 35 minutes or so, I think the Titans composition is just almost impossible to stop, in my mind. I think it's going to be too difficult to get past Aurora, who's one of the premier Umoja players in the league. All that sustain, plus Benji's Guan Yu, plus Double Hunter. I mean, they've got objective DPS, they've got siege potential, they've got everything in this composition, but they have to get to late for it to realize and come together. The Kings, I'm looking for them to hit the gas pedal in the mid-game and try and leverage their comp strengths there.
That's what they're going to need to do here in this one, isn't it? It almost feels like the Camelot Kings really need that first Cuckoo ult to hit, right? Or else they'll be in sort of this long, drawn-out fight that's their way. I'm also a little surprised that Genetics won this for us. He's played it before, but felt a little bit like a wrong you special last year. Maybe Necroid asking his new support to hop on that one for him. But either way, I think it's something that can at least help him keep up a bit with that sustain. Horus has some of that healing that will be helpful for him in that fight, but this feels like one where the Camelot Kings can't afford to kind of sit on their hands. And for what it's worth, they didn't in game one, did they? They were constantly on objectives, constantly putting the Tartarus Titans to questions and forced them to come over and respond. So if they can find a way to establish that same pressure, I mean, it's not quite Najah, but Athena jungle can certainly still set the pace here, I think, in Twig's hands. I think they're going to need it.
I agree, and I think that the way that the Kings played that last game, pace setting, being on objectives and buffs on time, working well together as a unit around those objectives, is really, really easy to keep that sort of train and momentum going whenever you've got an Athena on your team, because Genetics can walk up first and be there a little bit too early potentially, and then just get the reinforcement coming from Twig. The same can be said the other way around, right? I mean, Horus has that to the Sky's ultimate. He can get there faster than most other Guardians. So I just think that this composition is well drafted for the Kings, and I'm excited to see what they can do in that mid game, but I do think that they're on a clock in this one, because the Titans composition late game is fearsome to say the least.
Chibalanke, man, like, we don't see him as much, but that is a strong ADC when he's able to get those items online. Take a look at this pathing that's being taken by Scary D. He ends up coming back towards Twig. Perhaps he was looking for a dual lane wrap around a gank, but once Twig spots that out, no chance of that being successful anymore. You talked a bit about how you expect Ao Kwang to be stronger, maybe even picked up a little bit more. I think you've got a point there, man. He can be, or at least was considered before, to be a little bit slow. I don't know if that's the case for him anymore. Like maybe 1 or 2 items online post boots, and my man's ready to scrap.
Agreed. He doesn't take that long. I mean, he's got pretty good damage these days. He sustains pretty well because of his passive. He's just good. He's just a good god. That's all there is to it. I mean, the most recent changes were at the end of Season 7 for this god, so it's been a little bit since he's really seen that type of love. But with the bigger map, it's harder to punish him. It's harder to sit on top of him and steal away all of his farm constantly. With that in mind, he's able to get to that 1 or 2 item power spike a little bit easier. Rod of Tahuti being better is really good for this god. He really leverages that item super well, because that initial burst of damage gets you below that 50% threshold, and then all of a sudden, you're just getting absolutely cut to pieces by that Dragon Call.
These blue buff invades are the game plan for Camelot Kings, but luckily Scary D is here to help defend as well. Blue buff does get dropped on the Order side, and not much chance the Camelot Kings can look for more aggression on the back side of it, but they were there and just about in position to be the aggressors on it, just not quite in time. I like this from the Camelot Kings. They are coming in with a clear game plan to put on pressure, but Variety in trouble. Has that Somersault Cloud and the Defender of Olympus, so Benji forced out quite a bit of response, but more than force out. Now my man is in trouble. The response from the Kings is just too strong. That's first blood.
Again, it's the Kings are just in control, right? Never for a minute do you feel like Variety has made some sort of huge misplay and caught himself off guard, though Tings might be in the wrong position here, but Aurora comes in, does a ton of damage, great ultimate, absolutely perfect, and then no one's there. And that's it. You get the beads out from Tings, so certainly worthwhile. You force him back to base. It's good work by Aurora, but no kill on the board quite yet for the Titans, whereas Variety baits the ultimate from Benji, and then the Kings are there in force in order to punish him on the back end.
And for Guan Yu in particular, it's so binary for his gank, for a lot of gods, but especially him. When that horse is up, there's really just no shot of being able to catch up to him and lock him down, maybe with an Amir wall, but even still. But once that's down, there's hope as Paul drops the ultimate. That allows him to take Genetics out of the fight. Twig steps up, finds some nice engage onto Aurora, but they cannot afford to keep up the aggression. I thought we might see Genetics stop on him, but there was backup for the rest of the Titans. I like the Kings kind of resetting. I don't think they need to take an impromptu battle. They've been doing a great job taking the ones they've scheduled and just kind of responding to those effectively. I like them playing it a bit cool there.
Well, no surprise to me that Paul is still Paul here in Season 8. One of the things that always impresses me about Paul's game is his relic usage is really good. Probably the best of any backliner in the SPL. It's what makes him so hard to kill. And right there, didn't even need to use a relic. Genetics blinks over the vine, comes in at a weird angle that Paul normally probably wouldn't be used to. And not only does he not have to beads, but before Fracture hits him, 180 through the realms to Genetics out of his face. Just got him out of there. And not only does it keep him nice and safe, but put Genetics in an awkward position as well. So that's what I'd expect more and more of from Paul. And that's where this Horus is so good as an engagement god, as an enabler for your damage, but his engagements are pretty telegraphed. You know, you're blinking or you're threeing to somebody, and then you're dashing in a straight line at someone, and someone like Paul is not going to get caught using beads too late. He's not going to get caught with his ultimate up the vast majority of the time. That one is something that I think an interaction that we're going to see as this game continues.
Do a bit of a roundup on these builds. Paul in mid on Heimdall, essentially building no different than one would over in the duo lane. Now there's a bit of action. Those vines come up and separate this fight in a bit. That's the River's Rebuke down from Aurora, and Twig is the target on this Athena. But can he escape? There will be no defending Olympus today. Aurora catches Twig before he can make that escape. It looked like Twig kind of had some backup there, but kind of got separated back towards that gold through to the side.
Now it's Ting's in trouble in mid. Beats used, but it doesn't matter. Benji is going to be able to put the Titan's second kill on the board, and Variety thought he was going to be able to get him back, but Paul says no.
Instead lands right in the thick of it. Scary D is there, but Captain Twig never got to finish Olympus off. It is still available to use here, and the execute doesn't connect. Variety just gets knocked up, comes right back down to take care of Scary D. Somehow the Camelot Kings make that into a 1-for-1 mid for jungle.
Okay, I'm going to need to see a replay of that if we can, but I think Genetics might have just made the biggest brain play I've ever seen, because Variety was in execute range, and I think Genetics was out of heal range. You know, the travel time, you only heal when you arrive, so I think Genetics healed the clone to get the heal proc to go off in the AoE, and thus took Variety out of execute range and made sure that Scary died instead of him. If that's what happened on EU ping for the 50,000th time, I'm done, man. I'm losing it. That is absolutely wild if that's what happened. Either way, the result is good for the Kings. Scary falls, and Variety keeps that 2-0 record looking pristine.
It's a nuts start for him, you know, here to Genetics. And I was one of his, you know, critics coming into this season, but
Sam,
I don't know, man. I'm happy to see him do well, and that's exactly what he's done in an absurd circumstance for what it's worth, as he's been making plays for the Kings so far. It's worth noting, though, that Aurora is ahead, but there is a trade-off. It's big man Tings that's way ahead over in the middle lane. Maybe this farm not quite ending up where they'd like it for the Titans, as they are still a bit behind in some of those key roles. But a great beginning to this season so far. I know it's only 1 1/3 of a game here so far, but as far as a 1 1/3 game can go, it's hard to ask for much better than what we've seen from Genetics here so far. So you talked about how that Rod at Tahuti increase has helped out Kwong in the jungle. That's exactly where he's gone. It's boots into Rod. Looks like, though, we're going to take a look back at how he managed to survive and does just barely get out of that execute threshold.
Crazy. Maybe it was a pot ticking as well, because Genetics heal came in a little bit later, so it must have been a potion tick up above that threshold. And that, it's an overused word by no one abuses it more than me, but that is unlucky right there for Scary D. You hate to see it for him. At the end of the day, though, I mean, he's still in a good spot. He's above Twig in farm. That's where I think this lead for Tings might be coming from, though. Twig is now in trouble. Aurora with a good wall, but that's a Guardian, even though she's in the jungle. and Athena is A-okay. That's Aurora and Cyclone Spin's ultimates that really don't amount to much. About half of Captain Twig's health bar taken off the board.
I'm with you on the unlucky there. And I'm surprised Twig kind of in the same spot where that Rivers of Butte caused such problems for him before. Genetics on the way with the ultimate, and Aurora is the target. Revenge for the Kings in the middle lane as they find the enemy support this time, and they are not done. Looking for Scary D as well, who's forced to use the beads in order to evade capture. Now Cyclone Spin considering coming in. Yeah, I like exactly where he is right now. Not a single step further, and he does come in and provide a little bit of damage, but that is all. Camelot Kings doing a good job finding these all-in commitments.
They are. They're using these combos very effectively, but it hasn't amounted to as much as it did last game. The Titans are doing a much better job at fighting back, being more proactive. I mean, even that these are ultimates from Aurora. They haven't amounted to as much as they probably should, but at the end of the day, at least they're working on something. You know, at least they're pushing the tempo themselves instead of just waiting around and using it as counter engage. Feels like Aurora is going, hey guys, I don't care if anyone's here. I've got this guy trapped. Come kill him. I've got this guy trapped again. Come kill him. And we're just going to keep doing that until everyone's on the same page, until we're all here, and then I'm going to trap him and we're going to kill him, and it's going to go a lot better for us. So I like the style that Aurora's gone for. Genetics as well as he's played. I think Aurora's looked really, really good this game as well. He's been ahead in farm all game and looking very strong on this Yamoja.
Good reaction there from Scary D. Gets him out of the clutches of Captain Twig. We saw for a moment the Titans were considering starting up that Fury, and these two teams are kind of coming at these Furies from complete opposite directions. Titans are way better at DPSing it down, but are not going to be able to out-secure what they could do on the other side of that Camelot King, so they have some different approaches to it, but that often end in the same result. These are two teams good at kind of taking Furies before you can react. Just did not pan out for them over on that left side. Now, I know you were saying the Kings start to lose some of their effectiveness the later this game goes on. Is this pace from the Kings here enough? It's been good. They've been aggressive. Maybe this is our answer. They come right on over to the Fury and dare the Tartans to stop them, and there's not much they can do. Cuckoo won't come through, and the Kings get a big objective on the map.
And Genetics already channeling the to the skies to get. I love True. Got to be careful. Aurora has that, and that's his own and buff. Easy off mission. But it looks like the Kings, I mean, they used a lot of ultimates. They're coming to try and bail Variety out of danger.
Paul, though, makes it out. Bifrost so strong for safety, and in comes Benji on the top side. Meanwhile, in the back, Netroid just winning the 1v2. Did I see that correctly? As now he finds Aurora. Double kill with a little bit of assistance. And next up's going to be Benji. No taunt available for Twig to lock him down just yet. But what a sequence from the Kings. There it is. Taunt almost does it on its own, and Benji takes a seat alongside the other two members of the Titans. These Kings are having a hell of a start.
First off, shout out to Bird Form Only, baby. Variety getting in there with that one off the blink. But how about the Kings? Netroid standing tall. He's building for it again. This Ichabal just leveraging that early game pressure that Honor is going to bring. Then you were asking me right before that Gold Fury pull, is this enough from the Kings? And I really thought that it was, not because of their lead being bigger than it looked or anything like that, but I don't look at this draft and think hyper early game. This is the mid game that I was talking about. This is where you get your core items online and you're able to use your multiple forms of engagement. Your carries are doing significant damage at this point, and the healing and the tankiness isn't there quite yet from Aurora and from Benji. I mean, you're getting healing through things like cooldown, as Swan used. That's your heal cap, is how much your cooldown is. Right now, he's only sitting at that 20%. Now, he's got that Katakeya shield at this point, but that's going to up his healing and the healing from Aurora and the lifesteal, all of it. I love the shield here, but he's going to need more and more itemization in order to get to his max healing potential. And you look at someone like Ao Kwong, he's strong now that he has Rod, but he's going to be way stronger once he gets Telkines and some more pen and things like that. This is the perfect time for the Kings to step on the gas, and they're going straight to fire.
Wow.
I love it. They understand how their comp's supposed to work.
Yeah, and even if it's not about getting the objective right, you want to force Tartarus Titans to come in. You take whichever one, the favorite fight or the objective. They don't quite, though, get the fight they were looking for, and I think Cyclone's been doing a good job of spreading out this map, not all in rotating here the way and maybe some of the rest of the Kings are, and that lets him take care of that tier 1 towering left. No, it didn't quite pan out for them in their aggro, but I'm right there with you. That's the logic they should be operating with, where they're setting themselves up for win-wins either way it goes.
And look, if that doesn't work, Netroid loses a lot of farm, Cyclone gets a lot of farm. But the thing that I like so much about what the Kings have done so far is that they have been decisive. You know, no one wants the King to be waffling on what they want to do. The Kings seem like they have made up their mind coming into every single engagement of what the plan is. We're going to go to Fire Giant. Hopefully it works. All right, it didn't work. What are we going to do? Well, we can't let Cyclone free push, so a lot of teams would be like, oh, should we pull fire? I mean, we still have Cuckoo, you know, like there's this whole discussion. No hesitation from the Kings. It's no, we're stopping. We're not going to go for this play. We're going to send Netroid back. We can't let Cyclone get all that free farm and push to our Phoenix. And now they're going to reset and likely go for a similar style. Look at where Netroid's coming over. We're going to try on fire again. We still have Benji's cooldown on beads. We're still plenty strong. But now our wave's in a much safer position for us to make a play like this.
Yeah, to start this up once more and force the Titans to have an answer. Looks like they do have a ward, though, on that fire, so this is not a secret, but Variety playing the defense. In comes Aurora, and he's the only one this far forward to look for a contest. Meanwhile, Variety makes it up to the Somersault Cloud. The Fire Giant still low, and inside the threshold where a Cuckoo will take care of it. Genetics falls, but the Kings get the biggest objective on the map, and Variety even still finds the kill onto Scary D. The rest of the Kings retreating. And so far, this is looking like a very successful play.
Very successful. Cyclone still laboring on this left-hand side. He's going to be able to get this if he sticks around, but with Variety already back and with Blink up, he makes the right call. Doesn't stick around for that tier 2 instead. Just takes the L. The only thing that went wrong there is that Genetics fire tanking was poor. We'll go with poor in that instance. But other than that, flawless.
Paul drops the beads and the ultimate to try and find some breathing room. Hops onto the Bifrost, takes a nice ride. Will find himself finding good company in Aurora. And so that'll be enough for them to disengage. But yeah, I'm with you. Maybe kind of the only problem. I was wondering, we saw that tower shield from him and shifter shield so popular right now. That is where he's going. Kind of saying, listen, it's not going to be Paul in Cyclone Spin that deal with me. It's going to have to be Scary D that kind of cuts through all this with some of that magical defense. And I kind of like that stance, right? Kind of forcing Scary's attention onto him, or he'll just be an unkillable monster.
And Scary's at a point where he doesn't. Scary's irrelevant in this game right now. He's just too far behind. He got soloed by Variety in that fight, and Variety didn't need any help or need to blink or anything. He ulted, I guess, but that's about it. Scary now has Telkind, so it's better, but I mean, he is a full item down to Captain Twig on the other side. Now, sure, Telkinds and Rod both expensive, whereas Binding and Witchblade both cheap, but Twig has a Rod at Tahuti at this point. I mean, he's spent significant gold. Scary looks a little bit behind in the jungle so far. And look, that's expected. He's brand new to the role. You're going up against Captain Twig, who's coming back to a role that he played for years and years and years at a very, very high level. But you gotta. I think everyone was looking for how is Scary gonna do in the jungle. So far, not too great. He's dead.
No, and it's not gonna get much better, is it? He does manage to get away for a moment. Looks like the Bluestone ticks won't be enough. Blink. So Variety goes up to the ultimate. Now the Blink comes out, but I think the inevitable result was attained. Not much chance of him escaping. Meanwhile, Twig getting aggressive elsewhere can always show up with that ultimate. Perfectly fine with this way to split the map here for the Kings. And they're going to move right on to this left side. Phoenix, it looks like. They've got a wave coming in not too far behind them. And Genetics is going to be the one to kind of move this squad. I wonder where the call is. Maybe back to the tier 2 in mid. Takes him just kind of a little bit over. Not all that far, but I think they'll take it.
Yeah, I think the idea was we'll cut off Benji. Then Benji knows that it's happening because the Titan spotted out. Probably could have gotten that left side Phoenix, but safe rather than sorry. You're in such a commanding position here as the Kings. If you just wipe out these tier 2s, go back, get Pyromancer, you're up 10k and ready to go and set up for this next Fire Giant fight, where it's still, I mean, like I said, the Titans, if they get to hyper late game, this comp is so strong that the team synergy doesn't concern me too much. But we are now a good 15 minutes from that point. And the Kings, I think they got plans in the next 15 minutes, man. They're not going to wait around for the Titans to get strong enough to contest.
Well, the Titans are going to have to find, looking like several miracle defenses to try and stall out the path that the Kings are currently on. And it's just not going to get a whole lot easier there for them. Polynomicon there for Twig. Shifters rounding it out for Variety. Looks like more crit coming in for Metrioid. Heartward there for Genetics just to add that magic defense in an aura, just in case Scary does become a problem. Even a little bit of damage there from Aurora as well. Once again, it feels like they're rounding these builds out with some great ways to shut the door on their opposition, make sure they don't end up in all that much trouble. So where do they go first here on this one, Aggro? Should they come back over to left, push down on this mid? How do you want to see them go about this siege? Or are they even waiting for another fire spawn before they come all the way down?
I'd wait for another fire spawn. That's where that's where you want to take the fight if you can, if you're the Titans. But if you can get another pick over here on this left-hand side, Scary, invisible, but Twig smelling dragon somewhere around here. He's gonna find him, and I don't think Scary's getting out of this one.
No, instead realizes he's got to try and turn and fight. No hope of that being successful. And that will be it for Scary D. And it looks like in the 5v4 maybe they push up. Nope. That's going to be the Mac. Metroid and Captain Twig both returning. And they will indeed come on over here towards this Fire Giant, as you said. And there should be really no contest, I'd imagine, on this one. If I'm the Titans, I'm kind of doing my best to set up my defense back in the base and hoping that you can hold them off. Really not much of a shot that you slow this down. Goo on there, too.
But again, it's this composition is not meant to siege defense for the Titans because you've got no mage to clear the wave. You've got just sustained DPS. You don't normally on siege defense, burst damage is very valuable because if you can chunk somebody like the tank who's going to be tanking the Phoenix or the carry who needs to be hitting the Phoenix, if you can chunk them and force them to reset, that buys you time to go back to your own fountain, heal up, be ready for the next wave or whatever is coming in whenever they start to fight again. Sustained DPS is not great on siege defense because the front line is going to be so staunch that you can't get to that back line. And so you can't bring that big burst of damage. Now, if you can chunk through and eat Genetics or Variety or Twig alive with these auto attacks, I mean, you're deep enough in the builds now, upgraded starters for both Cyclone and Paul. You've got potential to try and insta-kill a frontliner before they're expecting your damage to be that high. But Twig's got Bumba's Hammer Polynomicon. If the Kings want, they can stand on the Phoenix edge and just reach auto down with the Poly procs and the Bumba's procs on the Phoenix. And Titans are going to have to answer that. Like, they don't even need a full wave in order to do it. Look at that damage.
Yeah, and really, since the beginning of this set, have the Kings even broken stride? It hasn't felt like it so far. It's felt like Plan A has just worked for them all set long, and they're whittling these Phoenixes down. Just as you said, it's Twig and Variety, a 3-2 split in MiG, and there is the dive in for Variety. He blinks in, so the response from Scary D is to look for DPS. There's just not that much there. They keep Variety and Twig at bay for now. But this is going to be a long, drawn-out push. If the Kings are happy with it, I think they probably could afford to all in, but I think they're happy with this pace too.
I mean, they just got Paul's beads and ult, so that's a huge get for just Variety's blink. I think the main thing that they're going to have to worry about is that remember that they don't have the sustain. It's the sustains on the other end. The Titans are the one with all the healing.
See if Fire Giant can even that out because Scary D's taking so much damage. There's the reach, nearly putting him down alone, but Variety with the Somersault Cloud gets the kill. That pulls too many over to mid, but they Horus everyone over. Genetics pulls off the Okie Doke. They take care of the mid Phoenix, and now it's on to right. Meanwhile, Variety is a wall. No chance that the Titans can get past that. The right side Phoenix, a distant memory, and the Titans never even get to play defense. In comes Aurora with that River's Rebuke, looking to cut off the fight, and they do put Variety down low, but it's just nowhere near enough. How is he still alive? Defenders Olympus putting in work.
This Athena, man, this got past 10 bans. It got past 10 bans, I think, right?
They picked it in the second round, yeah. Yep,
right,
exactly.
That is wild to me. I have no idea how that keeps happening, man. Bumba's Poly Athena just soloed Scary D from a distance as a Guardian. Like, that's what we just saw happening. That is not chill, man. I'm not loving that if I'm Scary D. I'm telling you that much. It feels completely unfair when you're playing against it, and Twig is really putting it to work. I love the way he's playing it.
Tartarus Titans still have one leg to stand on. Variety makes it up to the sky and will begin the process of healing. Left side Phoenix is low, and the Kings want it. Netroid steps up, has the damage, but they cannot take care of the Phoenix just yet. So fall back, get some heals from Genetics and the Fire Giant, and then plan on coming back in. They don't have the ult for Genetics or Twig, just Tings and Netroid, and that taunt finds two Tings, flattens Aurora, and no interaction points for my man to find a way to respond.
And this left side Phoenix on its last legs, the base of the Titans on its last legs, taunted on Paul, no shot, 5 in a row for Netroid.
So in the late game, taunt's just a death sentence, huh? Well, we just saw it just now. And if you don't have a response, there is no way to get back out. The Kings move onto the Titan, another taunt just for good measure, and the very first set of SPL Season 8 belongs to the Kings.
Hail to the Kings, baby. It's that easy. That whole game was in Camelot, by the way. Home court advantage, it turns out, for the Kings, because they made it look so simple. I just love the way that they all five. I mean, remember, these are 5 players. There have been some teammates in the past. You know, Twig and Variety have played together in the past. These 5 guys did not play together at all last year, but they have come in, and whoever is doing the majority of the shot calling, whoever is calling the macro for them, whether it be Genetics or Twig, usually it's the support or the jungler, the fact that all 5 players have bought in is the thing that really impresses me. That they seem like they are all on a tight leash. They trust one another already, and I'm impressed with what I saw from them.
I said coming in, I don't know if there's a team in the league with more to prove than the Kings. Well, I think they just proved it. It'll be a quick break, but we'll be right back to break this all down.
That music works so well. The mismatch video with music, it's all joyful and dancey, and it's Heimdall killing off some skeletons or something. What a world. Welcome back to the SPOs, the post-game breakdown after the Camelot Kings take out the Tartarus Titans. And Gore, that is, I think, a gentle way of putting it. This was not particularly close after the first couple of minutes. This Kings team came in with a lot of question marks. We'll reiterate our talking point from the start of the day. We thought there would be some growing pains because you're throwing together a bunch of guys who don't have all that much history in playing with one another, and they just decimate this Titans team. I mean, this was clinical from the Camelot Kings.
I mean, look, you go back not even a week ago, go back 2 days ago, yesterday, we were talking about the Titans as a team we all expected to be top 3 minimum, right? And let's be honest, there's still a lot of room for that, but I didn't think the Kings, at least this early on, were going to be as heavy a contender for the top 4. I thought it was going to take maybe half a phase, at least a couple of weeks, right, to get everything under wraps. This is, I think, more of a statement from them and maybe more of a statement about the Titans than we would have really expected. I mean, it's just day one. That's literally the first set of the SPL. First off, congratulations to them for striking first blood and what is going to be a long year, 3 phases of play that they'll have to go through. But that is the way you want to start it. All expectations are on the other team. You look, I mean, Paul, Scary D, 2 back-to-back world champs playing on a team together. Benji, Aurora, Cyclone. I mean, you've got so many champions on one side of the map here for the Titans, whereas, you know, unfortunately for well, people like Twig, I was going to say that, you know, I mean, he's always been, you know, the bridesmaid, never the bride, always making it to the finals, never quite cresting there. I mean, Netroid, literally 5-0-2. He got kicked off his team from last year moving into this, and yet he's still coming in and showcasing why he is one of the top hunters that we can see in the league. They just played so well. I will give them all credit in the world. They played far above the expectations I had for them. Originally, I thought it was going to take a while to get even close to this point, and that is a way to kick the door down and just make a statement on day number 1.
And luckily, the argument is the same but flipped for this Titans team. It's a long year. We got 3 long phases. You got time to grow into things, right? The Kings maybe ahead of schedule, at least from what we saw in their first set of the year, but Titans have plenty of time to catch back up with the potential that we know that this team has. It was just such a rough day for that Titans squad. I think better to focus on the good that the Kings brought. I was so happy to see what Captain Twig was able to do in the jungle. That is our first of 6 SPL sets we have here this weekend. 2-0 for the Camelot Kings. And Gore, our next matchup, Leviathans versus the Bolts. There's some history between these two teams. If you look back last year, the teams they were playing under, Sanguine and the Renegades respectively, this Bolts roster gave the boot to the Leviathans roster for most of the tournament structured weekends that we had last year. Yep. And also, after watching a game like that, the Leviathans team saw the guy that they kicked get a swift 2-0. Netroid decimates their opponents here in week 1. Now it's Yarkor going from solo. I mean, there are so many storylines based purely on roster swaps, I think, to look forward to here. Are you excited about the Leviathans and the Bolts matchup?
Oh, yeah, I think there's a lot. And again, we have some content that's going to be coming out about like roster swaps and stuff like that we've been working on with a lot of these players. But for both of these teams to essentially end up with still 80% of what was their team last year, still some swaps, still some things to get used to, it should be a really fun match.
Absolutely, Gormizer. I cannot wait to get into that one. Leviathans versus Bolts up next.